In July of 1518, on a narrow street in Strasbourg, a woman walked out of her front door and began to dance. No music played. Nobody had asked her to. She simply started moving, alone, in the summer heat. And here is the thing that should bother you. She did not stop. For the first day, her neighbors probably just rolled their eyes. A grown woman twirling in the dirt, sweating through her dress, saying nothing at all. Strange. But life was hard, and people took their entertainment where they could find it. Except she was still dancing that evening, and the next morning, and the morning after that. Her name was Frau Troffea, and by the third day, her feet were bleeding through her shoes. And still she moved, arms flailing, like her body belonged to somebody else. And then something happened that turned one strange woman into a nightmare. Other people started to join her. Within a week, more than 30 of them were dancing in the streets. Not celebrating, not drunk, just dancing, with the same blank, exhausted, terrified look on every face. Within a month, historians estimate the number had swelled to around 400 people. 400 human beings, dancing without rest, without joy, in a city that had no idea how to make them stop. And some of them danced until they died. This actually happened. It is one of the best documented mass events of the entire medieval period. We have the town council notes. We have the physician's records. We have the sermons. This is not a legend passed around a fire. This is paperwork. So the obvious question is this: how do 400 people lose control of their own legs at the same time? To answer that, you have to understand just how bad life in Strasbourg had become by 1518. The years before had been merciless. Failed harvests had driven the price of grain to the sky. Famine stalked the region. And where there is famine, disease follows close behind. Smallpox, syphilis, a mysterious killer they called the sweating sickness, which could take a healthy person from breakfast to grave by supper. So morale, as you might imagine, was not high. The people of Strasbourg were starving, frightened, and grieving. And into that pot of misery, someone tossed a very specific superstition. They believed in a saint named Saint Vitus, and they believed that if you angered him, he could curse you with an uncontrollable, punishing dance. Hold on to that idea. It matters more than it sounds. When the dancing began, the authorities called in doctors, and the doctors examined the situation with all the rigor of the age and reached a confident diagnosis. This was not, they declared, caused by sin. It was not caused by spirits. It was caused by hot blood. Overheated blood in the veins, naturally. And the accepted cure for a fever of the blood was, apparently, to sweat it out, which led the city fathers to one of the worst medical decisions in recorded history. They decided the dancers simply needed to dance it out of their systems. So the city cleared out 2 guild halls. They built a wooden stage. They hired musicians, pipers, and drummers to keep the rhythm going. They even paid healthy, professional dancers to move among the afflicted, to keep them company and help them finish the dance. You can guess how that went. They had taken 400 exhausted, dying people and given them a live band. The dancing did not burn out. It caught fire. More collapsed, more joined. The death toll climbed. And that raises a stranger question. If it wasn't hot blood and it wasn't a curse, then what on earth was actually happening to these people? For centuries, the most popular answer was poison. Specifically, a fungus called ergot, which grows on damp rye and produces chemicals closely related to LSD. Eat bread baked from moldy grain, the theory goes, and you might hallucinate, convulse, and thrash. It is a tidy explanation. It is also almost certainly wrong, because ergot poisoning does something very particular to the body. It chokes off the blood flow to the limbs. It causes agonizing cramps, gangrene, sometimes the loss of fingers and toes. What it does not do is let you dance, in rhythm, coordinated, up on your feet for days at a stretch. You cannot do a careful jig on legs that are dying from the inside. The poison theory simply doesn't fit the evidence. So a historian named John Waller went looking for a better one. Waller spent years on this and laid it all out in his book, A Time to Dance, A Time to Die. His conclusion was that the dancing plague was real, but it was not caused by anything in the water or the bread. It was caused by something in the mind. Waller argued this was a case of what we now call mass psychogenic illness, mass hysteria, a phenomenon where extreme shared psychological stress erupts as very real physical symptoms. Not faked, not pretend, genuinely uncontrollable, but born in the brain, not the blood. And here is where that superstition comes roaring back. Remember Saint Vitus, the saint who could curse you with a dance? The people of Strasbourg did not just fear that curse in the abstract, they believed in it completely. They were primed for it. Waller's theory is that in a population already broken by famine, plague, and fear, a single trance-prone woman, Frau Troffea, began to move. And the deep collective belief that Saint Vitus was punishing them did the rest. The fear became the disease. Belief wrote the symptoms. And once a few people slipped into that trance, others, watching, terrified they were next, tumbled in right behind them. It sounds far-fetched until you realize it wasn't even the first time. Outbreaks of compulsive dancing had rippled along the Rhine for centuries before Strasbourg. There was a major one in 1374 across dozens of towns. Contagious, inexplicable, unstoppable dancing was a known horror in this part of the world. 1518 was just the largest and the best recorded. Even Paracelsus, one of the most famous physicians of the age, showed up years later to weigh in. And he concluded in his professional medical opinion that Frau Troffea had started the whole thing partly to spite her husband. Medicine had a long way to go. So how did it finally end? Not with a cure. The authorities, having at last noticed that the live band was making things dramatically worse, changed course completely. They banned music. They banned public dancing. And then they did the one thing that actually seemed to help. They loaded the survivors into wagons and carried them to a shrine dedicated to, of course, Saint Vitus. There, in the very place tied to the curse they all believed in, the dancers were given small crosses and red shoes, and led through a ritual to beg the saint for forgiveness. Priests performed the rites. The dancers were told, with total authority, that they were now healed. And slowly, over the following weeks, the dancing stopped. Which tells you something quietly astonishing. If a belief could switch the sickness on, then a belief, delivered with enough conviction, could switch it back off. The same shared conviction that started the plague was, in the end, the thing that ended it. By the time the streets of Strasbourg finally went still, dozens were dead. Some accounts claim as many as 15 people a day at the peak, killed by strokes, by heart attacks, by sheer exhaustion. Killed, in the end, by an idea. We like to think our bodies belong to us, that our arms and our legs answer only to us, that we are, above all, in control. But in the summer of 1518, 400 people in Strasbourg proved something we still find hard to accept. A frightened mind, in the right conditions, can seize the body and refuse to let go. So the next time you catch a yawn from a stranger across the room, or feel your foot tap to a song you swear you hate, remember Frau Troffea, who stepped into the street one summer morning and danced until her whole city followed her into the dark.